Crazy Rich Asians is a movie about an ordinary person suddenly becoming extremely rich, but it doesn't even begin to cover the real world. This is how history's biggest idiot accidentally became a millionaire. Our story begins in 1729 in the city of Boston, a city that was so fancy back then, they literally had a sign outside of town warning people not to enter unless they were carrying at least 3 shillings. This was the time period when rich people wore wigs and acted like they were royalty, and our would-be millionaire, Timothy Dexter, had been born into poverty and spent most of his life as a farm slave. He'd never seen a rich person in his life, so when he finally earned his freedom and moved to Boston, he thought that if he put on their fancy clothes, he could fool everyone into thinking he was one of them. Unfortunately for Timothy, this didn't work. People just laughed at him. They thought he was the biggest idiot in the world, and honestly, they weren't really wrong. Timothy knew nothing about money. He didn't know how to read or write. He couldn't even tell the difference between different coins. But he did have one thing going for him, an entrepreneurial spirit. He tried his hand at several different businesses, but nothing seemed to work. Finally, he hit on the idea of selling mustard seed packets, which was a very popular product at the time. He went to Europe, bought a bunch of seeds, and started selling them back home. Business was good, but not great, so he decided to take a trip to London to try and find something new and exciting to sell. In London, he saw some incredibly gaudy hats that were being worn by the upper class, and he thought, these are pretty cool. I bet I could make a killing selling those in America. After buying a bunch of hats, Timothy returned to Boston and started selling them. Again, business was good, but not great, so he decided to go back to London to see what else he could find. In London, he found some men selling Italian silk stockings and realized that the quality was much higher than the stockings he was selling. So he started importing the Italian stockings and selling them in America. Finally, he had struck gold. His business took off, and he became the biggest seller of stockings in the entire American colonies. Throughout his travels to Europe, Timothy kept striking out on his own, finding new products to sell, all the while copying the clothing, mannerisms, and speech patterns of the rich people he saw around him. Now, when he traveled through the streets of Boston, he dressed like a dandy and carried himself like a gentleman, which is when people started noticing him and asking him questions about where he got his money and how he managed to become so successful. And Timothy, ever the businessman, saw this as an opportunity to make even more money. So he started giving interviews to newspapers, magazines, and anyone who would listen, telling them his story and sharing his secrets for success. In reality, his only secret was to copy the rich people around him. And ironically, that was the same thing that got him laughed out of the room when he first arrived in Boston. But now that he was rich, people ate it up. They thought he was the greatest businessman in the world. In 2022, a team of scientists set out to find the most notable humans of all time. They combed through historical records and came up with a list of 2.29 million names of people who had made significant contributions to humanity. Then they ranked each person based on their impact in 5 different categories: science, politics, arts and literature, business and religion. Using a complex algorithm, they assigned each person a score from 0 to 1, with 1 being the best. Timothy Dexter ended up with a score of 0.983, making him the second most notable human being in history, right behind Jesus Christ. A lot of people on that list changed the world in big ways. Albert Einstein developed the theory of relativity and changed the way we understand the universe. Martin Luther King Jr. led the American civil rights movement and helped end racial segregation in the United States. Warren Buffett is arguably the greatest investor of all time, and yet somehow Timothy Dexter beat them all. How? Well, because although Timothy wasn't particularly smart, he did have one very valuable skill: the ability to spot trends before anyone else did. When he saw those rich people wearing those fancy hats, he didn't think, "Oh, how silly they look." He thought, "Hey, maybe I could sell those." When he saw those Italian stockings, he didn't think, "Wow, those are really expensive." He thought, "Hey, maybe I could sell those." That's all he did throughout his entire life. He saw something that someone else was selling and thought, "Hey, maybe I could sell that." And in doing so, he became a legend. Now, if you're thinking that sounds kind of stupid, I don't know about that. Let me ask you this: how many of us have gone to the grocery store and seen something that we've never seen before and thought, "Hey, I should probably buy this and sell it online for a profit. Raise your hand if you've ever sold something on eBay that you bought at a thrift store for $5. We've all been affected by the Midas touch of Timothy Dexter, whether we realize it or not. And it's not just us normal folk that he inspired. Some of the richest people in the world today still follow his simple philosophy. Take Warren Buffett, for example. He didn't start out with a ton of money. He got his start by investing in companies that he believed in. And what did he look for in those companies? Companies that were selling things that other people wanted, just like Timothy Dexter. It's the same reason why multi-million-dollar companies like Apple and Amazon started out by selling books and boxes in the mail. They knew that if they could figure out a way to sell a bunch of books or boxes to people, then they could make a lot of money. And they did. And it's not just big companies either. You can be a millionaire selling almost anything as long as you can figure out a way to sell it to enough people. And if you want to be really successful, you have to be willing to take risks. One guy named Nick Loper dropped out of college to start his own business, and today, he makes over $10 million a year selling portable basketball hoops. A woman named Emily Weiss left her job as a lawyer to start her own beauty company, and today, it's worth over $1 billion. As you can see, you don't need to be super smart to become a millionaire. All you need is a good idea and a lot of courage. Now, Timothy Dexter didn't go to school. In fact, he couldn't even read or write, but he was able to build a fortune that, adjusted for inflation, would be worth over $250 million today. However, there's a bit of a sad ending to this story. You see, Timothy loved flaunting his wealth. He would drive around Boston in a horse-drawn carriage with his 2 pet monkeys dressed up in fine clothes sitting next to him. He would throw massive parties inviting everyone from the governor to the local blacksmith. He wanted everyone to know that he was the richest man in town. But the problem was that he wasn't really that generous with his money. He was always trying to find ways to get even richer. And in the process, he ended up losing everything. You see, Timothy was so obsessed with making money that he invested in a ship called the Grand Turk, which was supposed to bring him a fortune from the East Indies. But the ship never returned, and Timothy lost a fortune. Just a few years later, he was back to being a pauper. And when he died in 1797, he left behind a legacy of ridicule and scorn. The people who once laughed at him for dressing like a fool, now laughed at him for being a fool. But over time, people began to forget about the real Timothy Dexter and remember the legend. Today, he's known as the man who accidentally became a millionaire, the dumbest millionaire in history, and my personal favorite, the king of accidental wealth. If you want to learn more about the amazing story of Timothy Dexter, I'll leave a link to a video in the description below. Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please hit the like button and subscribe for more content. Thanks. See you next time.